Hey, how's it going, Upeksha? Thanks a lot for being on the very first episode of the Just English podcast, and it's great to have you on the pod. So, having said that, I've got this big question I wanted to ask you, right? How does a Sri Lankan really improve their English speaking skills super fast, whether it be a student or a working professional? What do you think, Upeksha?
Yeah. Hi, Dilina. Thanks for having me. I would say, regardless of who you are, as you said, like a professional or a student, the only thing you need to do is use the language. That is one thing that we do not do. So I think one reason that we don't do is also there's this um, narrative of shame, humiliation, ridicule, uh, all of this associated with speaking in English uh, in Sri Lanka. So I think that is one reason why I think you had to ask that question from me also, like, what can we do? Because we have seen so many programs, so many teachers, so many tutors, so many, you know, money back guarantee or refunding, so many things for so long, for decades, I believe. So I think we just need our learners to understand the importance of using the language. But I think, as you asked me what they should do to improve, I think first of all, from my experience, I believe they may not have had that safe space to use the language. As I said, if you make a mistake in pronunciation or it could be in grammar, then learners are definitely going to get ridiculed. That is, unfortunately, the culture of teaching and learning English in Sri Lanka. It's a fact, but it is actually a very tragic situation because language is just a tool that we can use for communication. It's not something that should define who you are or what your intellectual capabilities are. But in Sri Lanka, it is more or less still, I repeat, unfortunately, it has become a class marker. It has always been a class marker. But as I said, the question is, do they have a safe space to do that?
That's very true. So something you mentioned was about being humiliated or else judged. Have you come across any such situations maybe through the years of teaching as a lecturer or
Definitely, I
maybe
have been ridiculed
oh wow, okay.
because I do not say vitamin and education, and people have, like, so-called colleagues have told me you can't teach English because you don't have an accent. So, but fortunately, I've had teachers, I've had professors, and one specific uh, professor when I was an undergraduate at the University of California. She made us feel so proud of who we are, the way we speak. She did not speak American English or British English. She said, I am a native speaker of Sri Lankan English. So I still do not say that I speak Sri Lankan English or whatever the variety. Because, like, for example, we have so many variants of English. You may have heard of Indian English, Nigerian English, South African English. So all these are variants. But back in Sri Lanka, we still have this, I would say, colonial servitude that we feel that we need to speak like the Brits. Even the Brits don't speak like the Brits anymore because we have added our own flavors into it. I mean, I personally believe as a teacher that's exactly what language is all about. And as teachers, we need to encourage in our learners the I would say we need to encourage them to be themselves. I mean, I do not, I'm not trying to say that you should encourage them to speak wrong English. That's not what I'm implying or I'm saying. What I need to say is like, what I'm trying to say is, when you walk into a classroom, if your students feel, oh my gosh, I am not going to say a word, if I say the slightest thing which is wrong, she's gonna I'm gonna be the laughing stock. If you walk into the class and your students get that feeling, I believe you have failed as a language teacher, especially in Sri Lanka as an English teacher. So you need to provide that safe space and make them feel, okay, I'm learning and I'm also making mistakes. So this is something that teachers should also understand, the fact that it is a journey. Just because you teach them, let's say, a grammar structure today, that does not mean that they are going to master it. It's not like teaching programming. No
True.
offense to teaching programming,
Right.
Java or whatever.
Sure.
But what I'm talking about is not that. It doesn't work that way. Just because you teach uh, your teach your learners, okay, this is how we use present tense. Because like we have been learning English for our kids learn English for at least I think 13 years.
Sure.
Because then in my case, I used to teach in higher education, so in the universities. So when they come to us, they are like, they're nowhere. Like I have had classes where I taught communication skills, English for academic purposes. Like sometimes there were several instances where after my first lecture, students there were instances where they walked up to me and said, "Ma'am, we did not understand what you said, most of it. Can you say it in Sinhala?" I'm like, I cannot say it in Sinhala because this module is an English
Right.
module. But the sad fact is that they haven't had that opportunity to make mistakes, to learn. And I had this habit of walking into my undergraduate classes and asking, okay, how many of you bunked general English?
Right.
Except for one or two, everybody was like, so then I started, I changed my question. I'm like, how many of you were there in class? Like two would raise their hand out of like 80, 60. So I changed my question. So I could have only two kids raising their hand. So that was it. They were like, we were scared.
Right.
And then we knew that even the teacher would sometimes would humiliate us. I know
Right.
it's a fact.
Now,
Students have narrated these, their
I see.
experiences. Yeah.
So if you were to go into a little bit of specifics in terms of judgment or people feeling ashamed when speaking in English, you mentioned your own example where people may be mocking you because you didn't have an accent, right?
Mhm.
Maybe at a university or at a workplace. What are some scenarios that you've come across or that you've seen where people are like, oh man, I really don't want to speak in English because people are laughing at me or people are judging me or people might really, consider me to be somebody who's not well educated or I come from a bad place in terms of my
Yeah.
background. So, what are some examples that you've come across maybe throughout your years of teaching or working with people?
Yeah. For example, I've had students, fourth year students, where they had to present a project, let's say something to do with computing or business, whatever. They, let's say I have been a panel member, like the final presentations, like we were there to assess their language proficiency. So it was heartbreaking for me. There were several instances where students, they had brilliant projects. Halfway through, they just freeze. They just break down, and then they ask their subject related lecturers, mostly professors, "Sir, can I say it in Sinhala?" And then they would ask us after 4 years of whatever, why is it? It's like, for example, now I've had this conversation, I have fought for them, I have fought for it. Like I would say, like in most of our universities, the whatever the modules they call it, like sometimes they call it English skills or whatever it could be, not just in public universities and private universities as well. It's mostly in the first year. So you teach them general English, whatever you want to call it, English I would say, academic writing, all these. So thereafter, everybody is more uh, focused on their specialization. It could be software engineering, it could be anything. It could be marketing, whatever you are doing. And then they just let go. And also the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, uh, the fact that English is, as you said, associated, is kind of, I would say, it's synonymous with lack of intelligence. That you're, in simple terms, that you're stupid just because you cannot communicate in English. But in most of the cases, it is not the case. These are like highly intelligent kids. It's just that they haven't been given that confidence, uh, and they haven't been given that space to make mistakes and learn. So
Have
they
you
what
seen
they
any particular situations where people losing out on opportunities because of the fact that they couldn't maybe present or speak in English, maybe in
Definitely, yeah,
probably
because
jobs or in education?
definitely. So I've had students who have come up to me and told me, Miss, I did not get the job. The one who got the job did not even have a class. So they're like very hurt. They feel deprived. They feel that a great injustice had taken place. So then I would say, so this is like, this was an engineering student. I know he worked really hard. He had a first class. And he said he wasn't recruited by this Korean company. This was, I think, civil engineering. He was like, no, the my friend, like he was like, I'm fine with my friend getting the job, but then I did not get it because I got stuck halfway through. And he didn't even have a class. He didn't even have a second class, but then he got hired because he had a brilliant presentation. He could impress the panel. And then they asked him to describe one of his projects, and then he did a great job because they had worked as group members even when they were undergrads, so he knew. So he was like, he was feeling so defeated. So these things happen, I think, on a daily basis. And I think now, if you talk to certain private sector employers, they would say our graduates are not up to the mark, especially in terms of communication skills. So they are not referring to speaking in the mother tongues, not Tamil, not Sinhala. They are talking about English communication. So this has been a problem. It is still a problem.
Why
And
don't we talk about this openly? What's keeping us from maybe, a bunch of people getting together and talking that, hey, we have this problem in Sri Lanka. Why is it so difficult to maybe talk about this, like the problem of English fluency and people losing out on opportunities because of this? Now, say, for example, you mentioned that there's a student that found it difficult to speak and did not get the job, right? He probably would have only come to you and must have spoken to you about this, right? I'm pretty sure he did not really go out there to the world and said, "Hey, I
yeah.
didn't get a job because of my English," right? So I'm just curious, why do you think that having this English speaking fluency problem uh, very silently in Sri Lanka? Why don't we really talk about
It's
this in the open?
Dilde, actually, it's not silent because we've had. I mean, if you take the last 2 decades, we've had several empirical studies done on both quantitative and qualitative, done at public universities and private universities about this issue, lack of motivation, why students find it difficult to uh, kind of speak up. And there have been several studies done on anxiety, speech anxiety as well. There have been books written, there have been journal articles, but I think so. It's just a matter of, I believe now, some have been done by universities, called academics, and also when it comes to the school system, I do not think the teachers have had the opportunity to get involved in research work, because I personally believe we have to start from the schools, because now they are the ones who are going to enroll in our universities in future. So teachers, I believe, they are in this rat race. They have they're like, we have the syllabus. We need to finish it. So this is so familiar. So we have this exam oriented system, and sadly, especially about since we are speaking about speaking, uh, we do not have a national examination that tests oral fluency, not at O levels, not at A levels. So we are focusing on the receptive skills. No, we do focus on, I think we focus on one receptive skill and one productive skill. So one is writing, the other one is reading. That's it. So the other most important productive skill is speaking. So that is not being tested. Now you are asking about missing out on opportunities. For example, one reason why our students find it difficult to maybe secure a scholarship in a foreign country could be the fact that they have a very poor IELTS score. Because when it comes to IELTS, you need to you have a speaking test. Our students have never had a speaking test. Unless you come from an English speaking background, you you do not have that experience of conversing in English, because like IELTS speaking test is also like just like a conversation that we are having, like a very casual one. But we do not teach that. We have dialogues in our textbook. So what do we do with these dialogues? That need to be that's where our focus should be. Because and also I think it's important. It's equally important to train the trainers. I believe our teachers, they are very hardworking. I have seen our teachers how hard they work with limited facilities. They're sometimes like superheroes. We need to give them that credit, but I don't think they have the pedagogical know-how. Because, for example, in other countries, uh, especially a country like Finland, I have little bit of experience with regard to that. All the teachers have to have completed a minimum of 60 credits in their degrees, as that covers pedagogical studies. They will not entertain anybody as a teacher without those credits. So just because I am fluent in English does not mean, just because I have a degree in English does not mean that I'm going to be a good teacher. Never.
100%.
So I think that is important. So we have the books, we have the material, we have the teachers, but how do we teach? How do we make our students feel that, okay, this is the space where I can fall and stand right back up? I don't think we have provided that environment.
Sure. Yeah, I think I totally agree with you on that, and that's a common problem that we're currently seeing in I think our basic education system. So I think we spoke about this before. We started the podcast, and
Yeah.
this interesting word that Sri Lankans have formed being "kadda." So tell me a little bit about the word "kadda," where it comes from, and believe me when I tell you, like this is the first time I'm hearing the history of this word. I thought "kadda"
Yeah.
was just a word that randomly occurred and was started off, but I think you know this way better than anyone else. So I think
Yeah,
I'll
so
share this over to you.
actually, from what I've read, Khadda originated in the university lingo, like university culture, subculture. So the word we would say in Sinhala, Khadda, Khadden Katakara or whatever. So that itself, when we look at the word Khadda, so Khadua is the sword, that is a weapon. So the general public, especially after 1956, we had the Single Only Act, and also like very few people had access to English education. Um, so now then, this sword is something that we associate with oppression, right? So however, it we there's this the the I would call it a social construct, where we started perceiving this as something that, so English was being weaponized. It was called a kadua. So the people with power used it against the people who did not have power. This is like it kind of infiltrated the entire social fabric, kind of a story. That's where all the humiliation, the ridicule comes from. And we started believing that those who had access to English were the more intelligent ones, which is not the case, as I mentioned earlier. And also, it became what you call like a class marker. So we have the ones who had the cadre had the power. So there's the politics of power coming into play, power politics. So as a result, those who had this privileged weapon, they used it. Of course, uh, the public believed that not necessarily to their own for their own welfare, right? But so, and also the fact that English has always been considered to be an elitist language. So I don't think I don't think we have come out of that mentality, not yet. And that is why I think earlier you mentioned like some people like to talk like the British or having the American accent, right? Like I have been asked by students, Miss, what is your accent? You
Right.
speak British or American? They really need to know because we always associate it with the norm. Okay, this is how we should speak, right? So kadde, as I mentioned, coming back to kadde, so it was something. Of course, English was called kadde. So kadde is a weapon. So English was weaponized against the majority who may maybe the majority who did not have access to English education. So they were in the vernacular system, who were speaking in either Sinhala or Tamil. So the students who enroll in our universities, most of them come from vernacular schools, where they up to their advanced levels they have studied either in Sinhala or Tamil. Of course, they had studied English, but as we mentioned earlier, that is again questionable. How much of learning has been done throughout these years? So, so Khadde is kind of a very heavy, very, I would say, it's a very symbolic term. So if somebody has a polished card, that means they were the privileged. So this was like a demarcation all the time. So people who had card, they had access to jobs, opportunities, scholarships, whatever you want to call it. But those who did not were the underprivileged. So I think
How would you differentiate somebody who was maybe born with a little bit of an English speaking background, and then also somebody who caught up with English speaking skills maybe a year or two a little bit earlier, say after their A levels, they spent time learning on their own and they figured it out. And then, maybe at university or at their workplace, they've been discriminated and they're like, no, you're privileged because you grew up with it. But, the individual who really put in the effort and time to improve their English speaking skills would know how hard it was. So, how would we really know that? Like, how would you differentiate it? And wouldn't that be a very unfair towards somebody who really had to go through a lot to come to that level? What do you think about that?
it is unfair, but uh, that's what it is. So
Right.
it has always been the case, right? For example, but I have come across several CEOs who had specifically instructed their HR to hire undergrads from public universities, because now we have, like, most of the time we have this idea that okay, those who graduate from private universities are fluent and privileged and they get all the best jobs, blah blah blah. So I know personally two people, CEOs, private companies, they have specifically given instructions to hire only uh, the grads from public universities who may have had it the hard way, just like you explained. So I think it's also important to accept that we have these demarcations, and it's important that we, like as you said, it's unfair. So unless the people who can actually uh, call the shots do something about it, this may not change in the near future. But also, I think the simplest thing we can do as people, I believe, as fellow Sri Lankans, if you are that privileged person who has had that English speaking background, as you said, a little bit of, maybe you went to a school where you had a lot of friends who spoke English and you automatically acquired the language. So be a little bit kind or understanding, acceptable, I would say, accommodating, less judgmental towards those who are trying to speak with you. Please do not crush them. I have seen this happening. I have seen teachers ridiculing kids, small ones, and it's they cannot even imagine the amount of harm that is being inflicted upon these young kids. Not just young kids, like for example, even this may be happening in the universities because they wouldn't speak up. I have struggled so much getting students to attend my class in the first. Forget about speaking in English. They were like, "Apo, English ba."
Right.
I remember I was conducting a research and I wanted to speak to. I was actually focusing on motivation and the connection and the interplay between motivation and the curriculum we had at that point in this where I was teaching at that time. So I was
Right.
interviewing, it was a case study, so I was interviewing students who were there in my class all the time, who had 100% attendance, who were doing their best, were like proficient, and I also wanted to speak to the kids who were bunking my classes. So
Right.
I sent out a few messages, and one guy had said, "Budu ammo manna yanne oy banina kata karan." Right?
Right.
So then I had to specify, and they said, "මට ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන් කතා කරන්න බෑ. මිස්ටර් කියන්න මට එන්න බෑ කියලා." So I told the messenger, "No, I'm not going to talk to him in English. I want to talk to him in Sinhala. And I just want to ask him why is he finding it difficult to come for my classes? Like, what is wrong?" And then you won't believe it, Dilina. This particular student's his interview it went up to 2 hours, whereas I
Wow.
finished everything else within 40. He had so much to share. Once it, like, once it thought he couldn't stop, and like first thing he asked me is like, "Miss increasing Hannah?" I'm like, "No."
Right.
So once he was convinced that this is not a trap, and then he opened up. He said, uh, I mean, I can't name the school. He's from one of the most prestigious boys' schools in Sri Lanka. He said, I was one of those people who never said anything because everybody else was so fluent. I felt like there's no need for me to speak, and I'm like struggling anyways. Of course, he said the, of course, the teacher had not ridiculed him ever, but he said I didn't get an opportunity either. So I was listening to everybody else. So that's it. That's my story. And then
That's
he
an
was talking
entire
about,
different.
yeah, yeah. He said the only time when he came to university, he wanted to learn English because he wanted to date.
Wow. Okay. Right.
So that's another thing, like especially for young adults, like they're like, I want to, date that girl, but then she's English speaking, so I mean, she would not be interested in a guy like me. So like I
I mean, you
remember.
can't ask. I mean, I think it's nicer when you have some pickup lines in English compared to singular.
Exactly, that's what he said. He couldn't even, like, he couldn't tell me like the word pickup lines. Like, I
Right.
remember like when he was talking to me, his friends were kind of hovering around. They were like, "Miss, he wants to speak in English. He has been trying so hard because he's interested in somebody." I'm like, "Oh, that's great." He's like, "No, I miss, it's not great because what." So like, Because and he was never in my classes. I used to have lectures like twice a week. He wouldn't be there. That is one reason I wanted to have him as a case. So this was it. Like for him, it was like, I mean, he was in the perfect school, one of the best schools. I mean, he could hear English, but he said he never got the opportunity to do that. So he was like,
I think this is a entirely different scenario. For example, from what you've shared, I understood two main scenarios. One being you're put on this environment where people are judging you, and on the other environment where people already speak in English, but you're not being pushed to speak in English. So it just becomes this thing where you don't really like push yourself too much, and then it just becomes a very normalized thing, which you're eventually going to have to catch up later in your adult
exactly,
years.
yeah, yeah. So that happens a lot. And I've had this, since you asked about my experience, I have this very interesting story where a student walked up to me and said he has a stammer, right? Like stammer or stutter, whatever you want to call it. He said, "Mata kata karanda bෑ ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන්." Like, I have this. Then he was speaking to me in Sinhala and he was perfect. There was no stammer or a stutter. So then I let him speak for about 10 minutes. Like he was going on, like how he freezes, how he has this stutter when he speaks in English, and then how he feels that he's being kind of. He said he feels like that the ground is going to open up and then he's going to get swallowed in. Then when he has this feeling like overwhelmed, and like all this in Sinhala, and then I was like, "तेव्हा होतं कथा करना because like his anxiety was so bad that he realized that he thought that he had a stutter. It was that bad. He said bad බෑ මට කතා කරන්න. But I'm like, I was telling him පුතා now ඔයා මට සිංහලෙන් කතා කරේ. ඉතින් එතකොට stutter එක නෑනේ. He didn't even realize that. So it can get that bad. So that's like one kind of extraordinary story, that student. So I think it still happens. So this
Yes,
having feeling safe is something our learners do not. That's a luxury, I would say. I would call it a luxury that our
that's interesting.
learners do not enjoy.
That's interesting. Because, okay, so if you were to look at it this way, right, it isn't that Sri Lankans don't have the opportunity to speak in English or practice speaking in English, right? Now, let's take a few scenarios here. One being tuition masters in Sri Lanka, and the other type being courses and classes that are offered by these larger institutes and
Mhm.
organizations. I mean, there's unlimited programs here. Like you would see motivational gurus like, hey, like improve your English speaking skills for just 5,000 rupees a month, and then you can also be like me and have a nice car after you can speak in English. And we have these other institutes that are like, you come to our program, you join us, and finally you can get a British accredited credential or something similar to that. And
Mhm.
as my experience, running just English, I've seen a lot of people that go into these programs and come out maybe with a certificate or by spending a lot of money on these things, but without this actual speaking skill in English. And from that point onwards, they end up losing hope. They're like, I tried this, I tried that, none of it is working out. I think I'm not really good at it, so I'm just gonna stay away from it. And they end up like cornering themselves. And but I'll ask you this a little bit more specifically. Do you think English classes and courses are a scam? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, you can see a lot of
I
tuition masters and gurus driving fancy cars and all of that, on their marketing and social media. And I'm putting this out there in the public because I firmly believe that education has to be something that you put in effort and you promise that you are going to deliver. And for whatsoever reason, if you're unable to deliver that promise, you should always return that money. And I am a avid believer of that. Like, For example, at Just English, right? If you do not improve your English, please, here's 100% refund, and it's okay. We'll try to help you again, but that's totally fine. So, what are your thoughts on that? Would love to hear a little bit more.
Um, I'm thinking whether we could call them scammers.
Maybe I went a little bit too extreme. We can lower it down a
No,
notch.
I think that's your frustration talking.
Yes, hopefully.
Yeah, so I would say like maybe they do want to teach English because I think they are tapping the right market because like English, so this is it's not gonna run out. So like
It's a gold mine, yes.
exactly, it's a gold mine. So and also it's like also kind of a landmine in the same
Yes.
because like it could just as you said like the learners may go into this and come out really disappointed, and then they would lose all faith in the language itself, and then they develop something called like I would say resentment, and they're like, oh, what's the big deal with English, and it's like then goes to a stage where it's like sour grapes. So it's this, I would say it's a vicious cycle. So sometimes I have come across some of these teachers or institutes. I think what's happening is so they would I think they mostly use drilling. So it's a
Talk to me
technique.
a little bit more about
Yeah,
that.
so
What is
drilling
drill?
is a technique that was used even during what do you call, so we had this method called, not we, like I think this was during the Second World War, if I'm not mistaken. So we had they introduced this method called audiolingual method. So they wanted soldiers to be implanted in different regions, like Poland, likewise. So they had to be given like an intensive course, like really intensive course in Polish or whatever, right? And then they had to be deployed in different locations, and they needed the language, the soldiers, even the simplest thing to talk to the citizens or something. So they came up with this. It is also called was also called army method, but in English teaching terms, I mean in terms of techniques, we call it audiolingual method. So they were given, let's say, structures like a basic thing like I am so and so. So you would say it in Polish, and you keep drilling it like maybe 60 times until you kind of master that. So they use these phrases like survival phrases kind of thing. And then I don't recall the exact number of hours they used. They had an exact package. So they trained their soldiers, deployed them, so they knew the very survival kind of foreign language, whether it's Polish or German or whatever in that region.
Maybe the most essential, words or things
Exactly.
that they need to
Yeah, the
converse.
phrases, whatever.
Yes.
So functional aspect of the language. So this drilling method, it could work to a certain extent, but the problem, Delina, was the fact that, of course, for them it was they did not have to retain it, because after the war it was like, I mean, you did
Right.
not need it, right? But the problem is when you use it actually to teach a living language, that's something that you really need to use. After a while, once you drill, it's not, you cannot retain it. After a while, you're going to forget it if you do not use it. So in these classes, what they do is, because I had this neighbor, I think this was like oh, more than 15 years ago. She attended this one of these massive classes. It was a residential, like residential. I think that he had a particular name. This
So I know what you're talking about.
so you won't believe it. She said certain phrases and question forms and all this. They had to practice like 300 times. By the time she came home, she had lost her voice. She had won a gold medal. Okay,
Oh,
she won a, yeah. And then after a month's time or something, she got called for an interview, and she came and she told me, okay, can you help me with the interview? I'm like, what about what do you want to practice? She's like, the basic things myself, like they will ask me about my strengths and stuff. I'm like, she's like, I want the structures and all. I'm like, what happened to ඒව මුකුත් මතක නෑ මට දැන්. Right? So this was like, so mind you, this girl won a gold medal. So then I asked her
For
what.
going through that program, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Right.
she had been drilling. She said like 300 times one particular structure. Where do you live? I live in Nugegoda. Blah blah blah. So that's called drilling. Like you drill, like literally.
Like just
The prob
memorizing or
Exactly
by
rote
making
learning. We
sure
call
you're
it
by hearting. Yes.
exactly memorize, paratize. I call it paratizing. All of that, but that doesn't retain. It's not retainable because you're not using it anymore. It's only in that residential area that you may use it, and it's gone. So sometimes I think most of these classes still they use it, and also they always listen to one person talking. Now, as you said, these are math classes, like thousands of students. Now, how are they going to win, and how are they going to practice?
Very true.
Just because you look at the gems of wisdom falling out of this person's mouth, and then you're like, oh my god, he's like,
Right.
it's like this,
You feel like progress, but honestly, it actually
exactly.
isn't progress.
Yeah, because you're not using it. Like the very first question, going back to what you asked me first, just use it. That's what we're not doing.
Yep.
And also, like, our learners watch movies, they watch dubbed movies. That is not gonna get you anywhere.
Yep.
Do not do that. I always tell my students, like even adult students, they're like, no, miss, we watch movies. I'm like, what kind of movies do you watch? Like with subtitles? Or no, no, we watch dubbed ones in Sinhala.
Right.
So what's the point?
That's a singular movie, right?
So, like, I think these techniques also matter. And I think, but I've had students who have had this unimaginable amount of intrinsic motivation. Um, I admire them so much. Like they would, I had some kids who would walk up to all these exhibitions, like educational fairs, Dilina, done by some universities. Like,
Sure.
sometimes they have it at the BMICH or what do you call this? SLEC or Foundation Institute. They have these universities coming from abroad and they having their stalls. I
Sure.
had this group of boys. They would go and visit all these exhibitions and would speak in English.
Right.
They were having so much fun. Nobody asked them to do it. But once they came and asked me, Miss Apigin try kar. I'm like, please do. Right? And then they would go, like, there's a time, I think I can't remember month, there are multiple exhibitions, education fairs. They would go collect all the souvenirs and the flyers and everything. And they would come and show me. And they were like, it was so much fun, and because they had some stalls had foreign university representatives, so they of course don't laugh at you. So that's what they loved about it. They were like, we did not feel uh, you know bad, or we did not have this sense of shame.
Because they were non-judgmental.
Exactly. So there was no judgment, zero judgment. They were like, we had so much fun. And also the fact that you need to have fun while learning English. You can't be resenting English and
That's very true.
learning it. But I think because of this Kadua mentality, that it is a weapon, it is something that is against us. It has also, I feel, kind of paralyzed this uh, learning system of ours as well. So
True. Okay.
that is a fact.
So, Upeksha, since you've you know worked with Just English for quite some time now, I was just curious to ask you, what do you think about the approach that we've taken at Just English on how we tend to work with students or working professionals or any individuals or groups of people that want to come in and improve their English speaking skills, and just as an additional and follow-up question, I'd also like to ask you, me as as the founder of Just English, what can I do to improve what we already do? What are things that I can spend more time uh, to make things better in terms of what we are trying to deliver and trying to change here in the education industry in Sri Lanka?
Yeah. So one thing I admire about Jay is the fact that you have provided that non-judgmental environment. That that's the one that I've. So you have gotten judgment out of that equation of learning and teaching English. So I think that's one huge win for you as a platform. And also when it comes to, from what I've heard from my students in my JE groups, so they are like, we feel so free. And sometimes they've told me that we didn't even know that we knew these words. They're like using these words and talking. They're like, we didn't know that. I mean, even today, a girl was telling me, Miss, I didn't know that I knew that word. Like it just came out. She's like, I think she took herself by surprise, and then she was like, "Wow!" She just said, "Wow!" Like she couldn't kind of fathom the fact that she said it. So that's important. And also, like in terms of what you could do further, I think if we could also work on specific scenarios and then get them to uh, speak, that could also be, because now we have casual convo. I mean, we do it a lot and they love it. But at the same time, sometimes they did ask me, like, of course, we do a little bit of interviewing skills, but then I think they, especially the uh, undergrads who are like in their third or the fourth year, they're like really focused on that perfect job. I need to kill it, that kind of thing. So they might find it useful if we focus a little bit more on uh, interviewing, interview skills rather. But uh, it may not be interesting to everybody because we have like quite a kind of a diverse group. So
Sure.
we have students who are actually kind of quite elderly also, and who are already established. So they might find it a bit uh, maybe, I don't think irrelevant. I don't know how they would take to it. Scenarios would be, I think, quite useful. For example, they have asked me like when we go to the doctor, how do we talk to the doctor? What do we say? How do I say that? Bada pipila or something. That's something somebody asked me this one day,
Okay.
right?
I'm not sure I know the word for that. I
Yeah,
think it's bloated, right?
it's
My stomach
bloated.
is a bit
Yeah,
bloated. Yeah.
exactly. uh
Right.
yeah, so something like that. But and also, like, but having said that, Dilina, I think it's a good thing that they do ask me, ask the moderator that, like, how to say that, because we have given them that safety to ask something. So I think that is important. Like, for example, I think in schools, if when the English teacher is going on, I don't think anybody can ask anything in Sinhala,
True.
right? So there's a stigma attached to using Sinhala in the English class. But according to latest research, we can use L1. So this is like the technical term for one's mother tongue. We call it L1. So according to latest research, L1 can be used meaningfully to accelerate the process of learning the second language. But when I was taught, like for example, I was like I started teaching when I was an undergrad, like just as a side hustle, you know. My senior teacher told me, I was teaching at an English institute. She told me, don't ever use Sinhala, ever. But I remember my professor would tell me, guys, if if you're using 50 words to explain Pakispetia in English, just say Pakispetia, get it over with, right? But when she said it, I'm like, that makes so much sense. But I don't think I could have been able to use it where I used to work. I would have been fired because I was like young and I was an undergrad and I was like just an kind of an apprentice teacher. So the first thing my teacher told me was like my senior teacher, like I observed her for about 6 months, like 1 year. I was assistant, then I was given a class in I think grade 3 or something. So she told me, do not use Sinhala. I shouldn't, I should never hear you using Sinhala. So I never use Sinhala. But then I remember like I struggled so much to explain certain things to these little fellows who are like grade 3, like maybe 8 years old. They would like just look at me. So I
Right.
went on because like she specifically told me, do not. And also the problem was in at that time, I did not have the pedagogies in me. And I was
So do
not
you
a
mind explaining
teacher.
what pedagogy is, just for
So
the listeners?
yeah, so pedagogy is like how you teach. How exactly do you teach? For example, now let's say I'm teaching grammar. The way I teach grammar to you and the way I would teach grammar to a, let's say the same thing I'm teaching, like present tense, has to be different. It has a lot to do with, I need to be aware of my student's proficiency, the tools he or she has, like the tools that I have, the resources I have. Like if I'm teaching in a school, in a rural area, I may not have the multimedia projector. So then what am I going to do? Am I going to use flashcards? Am I going to get them to, I know I have had several friends who had this magnanimous choice, who made this choice, okay, we are going to teach in the public sector. I admire them for that. So they go to these rural schools, they use their phones and their audios are everything. These kids, some don't even, they haven't even seen smartphones. So my friend would use, she would download YouTube, sometimes songs or whatever, and would play it in the class. So everybody kind of flocks around her. She plays it, and that's how she taught. So like, I mean, like, so she did not stick to the book. So like, she had that. But the problem is in Sri Lanka, I don't think the teachers are taught how to teach.
I think
It's
that's a
like,
very important element in education itself.
yeah, so pedagogical studies has to be mandatory. I mean, I mean, there's no question about it, right? So just because I know English, I can't teach. It's not going to happen because sometimes students complain. Like even we used to complain like about our professors at the university saying that, oh my gosh, he or she is like a walking library, but then they don't know how to teach. Like we were like lost, right? But I've had seniors who did a better job. Like we have this concept of kuppy. I'm not,
Yes.
you may have heard of it. So
Yes, I've heard
like
of it.
they do a much better job.
Do you mind explaining what a coup is, just for
So this is
everybody?
again university lingo, right?
Okay.
So it's kupis where a peer of yours who is quite confident in maybe a particular subject, let's say something, let's say fifth, I don't know, any subject for that matter. It's like when the exams are around, he or she would gather everybody, just give an intensive session, like the gist of it, like
Right.
the cream of it, within maybe a couple of hours. And with that, the entire batch uh, gets through.
Correct.
So the lecturer who taught, I mean, I'm not trying to insult anybody, but uh, so that means even though that particular student may not have been a teacher, they had, I mean, there are people who have this natural flair, who have the flair. That's another thing. But I have seen teachers who've had, because I have seen teachers where I live now who, I mean, they have astonished me with their pedagogies. Like I mean, I never thought, oh my gosh, like there's so much we can do back home in Sri Lanka if we provide this, because our teachers are quite skillful, hardworking. It's just a matter of providing them with that pedagogical know-how. I think it has to be done because the thing is, Dilina, now in Sri Lanka we have the system where you graduate, and I think you can kind of get a government appointment to teach. I think there's a system like that. So I am not too sure whether they're actually given the training to teach. I know teachers coming out of colleges of education. NOC, National Colleges of Education. In Sinhala, we call it Vidyapita. They have that training. I think that makes a world of difference. So it has to be a part of teacher education. I think that that is something. So we need to start from schools, and then, but it's a long journey. It's a very
Hopefully,
long journey.
hopefully we're able to take the very first steps, after we end this call. And yeah, I think possibly if we spend enough time and effort to build up Sri Lanka's English education space and get a bunch of cool people who really want to change it. I think this is very possible. I mean, for example, individuals like you, I mean, you're already doing it. I think maybe getting a couple of people, more people on board would really change things and take.
How I have seen how my students struggled, because I can feel them. So that is why I really admire what you're doing.
Oh,
And
thank you very much.
they have shared with me as well. And sometimes when they come back and I'm like, oh wow. It's like that satisfaction is I mean, I cannot explain in words. Like, and after a long time I'm feeling, because I've had a break from teaching.
Okay,
So it matters a lot for a teacher, and also like the feedback. And our teachers, I think, need to um, take feedback seriously.
true. This call is entirely feedback for myself as a founder, just to go back and just put in the work and make sure I take just English to a better level. I think this is like literally like a customer slash what do you call user feedback call for me right now. And I'm like, oh wow, this is a lot of insights. I'm gonna have to transcribe all of this
Yeah,
and
I
hopefully
think you
send it.
could also have, since you mentioned feedback, since I started and then you kind of took it up on it. Um, like, I think you could also get feedback from our students. I don't know whether there's already a system.
I do
Like,
that actually, jump in and talk to them.
yeah,
But I
each
think
day
we need to
I
do that more.
ask them. Each day I ask them, like, what did you, is there anything that we should do? And they are very candid about how they feel, what they feel. And I think you have got a good bunch in. So
That's great to
whatever
hear,
you're
Upeksha.
doing to get them, it's working.
Well, that's very, very nice to hear. I'm glad it has been
because
working.
because I feel, Delina, that they are like, really, they have that drive.
Mm,
They have that drive. Like, they make so many mistakes, but they don't give up. And then one girl was today, she was like going on, she's like, I don't give up. uh, I'm like, I think the word you might want to use it, perseverance. She's like, අන්න හරි ඒක මං කොහරි දැක්ක මට ඒක මතක්.
right.
But I like when they, when they're like, when I see that level of motivation, it's very encouraging for us as well, even for
Sure.
you.
That makes
That's
sense.
why I'm
Yes,
sharing that with you.
for sure, for sure. I totally agree with you on that. And having said that, Upeksha, I don't want to take a lot of your time. We've already spent an hour here having this conversation with
It
me.
was my
And
pleasure, because it's something that I'm passionate about, as I told you earlier as well.
And I personally did gain a lot of insights from this conversation, and I enjoyed it a lot because I think there were so many things that I didn't know, even by running an English education company. I think I need to spend a little bit more time diving deep into where these problems occur, how these problems occur, and also how people are solving it. I can obviously come up with my own solutions to solve it, but
Hmm.
understanding the fundamentals would really add in a lot more as well as a founder itself. So I think
Yeah,
it's going to be pretty helpful. But thanks a lot, Upeksha. Really appreciate it, and I absolutely enjoyed this conversation. I hope we can do this again sometime as well, right?
definitely.
And and this is like the first ever podcast that we're doing at Just English. So thanks for being like here, and like thank you for being enthusiastic enough to be here. So
Yeah,
really appreciate
I
it.
mean, thank you for the opportunity, and it's like, it was a pleasure, because this is a real issue. And the fact that someone young is addressing it, is important because we had a topic about somebody being young, and today they had a confusion. They were asking me, uh, does it mean teenagers? So people like us. I'm like, people like you. So
Right.
it's important. I think it is something that it's good to have that confidence, and the fact that you're open to
For
feedback.
sure. Yes. For
That is
sure.
something that some of our people are not open to, not just teachers.
Yes. That's very
So
true.
yeah, so I think I learn a lot from feedback. I learn a lot from my students. I mean, I can't be this sage. Okay, I know everything. I don't know much. So I think it's important for teachers to learn. And if you're not good learners, you can't be a good teacher. So I mean, it's something that I've always believed in.
For sure. For
And
sure.
if you're not a good learner, you can't be a good CEO either. So,
Yes, that I agree.
so I think you're trying to learn here. So that
Yes, 100%.
that I can see.
100%. Alrighty, Upeksha. Thanks a lot for the time then. Really appreciate it. And let's catch up on hopefully another episode of this
Yeah,
conversation.
no
Alrighty.
worries.
Thank you then. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.